First Contact's Aftermath. Ambassador Zixtal stood at the panoramic window of the Galactic Council's orbital station, his 4 eyes fixed on the strange vessel docked below. Unlike the sleek, crystalline designs of the Auroran ships or the biological curves of the Vextherian vessels, the human diplomatic craft looked like it had been cobbled together from industrial spare parts. Yet, somehow, it had managed to bypass every security measure in place with embarrassing ease. The humans had arrived 3 standard cycles ago, not through any of the designated first contact protocols, but by simply appearing in the middle of the Council's most secure space. Their explanation? They had figured out a few shortcuts through spacetime and decided to drop by to say hello. Most unprecedented, wouldn't you agree, Ambassador? The voice belonged to High Counselor Nvari, her bioluminescent patterns shifting in what Zixtal recognized as deep concern. Unprecedented doesn't begin to describe it, Zixtal replied, his secondary arms instinctively crossing in a gesture of protection. They violated 67 different security protocols in their first hour alone. Yet instead of apologizing, they offered to help upgrade our systems. Nvari's tentacles curled in amusement. And their upgrades work better than anything our best minds have developed in the last millennium. The Security Council is still trying to decide if this is a cause for celebration or panic. The human ship below suddenly shifted, its hull seeming to ripple like water. Several nearby maintenance drones immediately went into emergency shutdown protocols. Zixtal had learned this was a side effect of what the humans called their probability wave drive. Apparently, their ships didn't so much move through space as they did choose the most convenient reality where they were already at their destination. Have you reviewed their technology exchange proposal? Nvari asked, her primary eyes fixed on a holographic document floating before her. 17 times, Zixtal admitted. Each time I find something more disturbing than the last. Did you know they're offering to share their artificial gravity technology? The same technology they use in their entertainment centers for something called roller coasters. Entertainment centers. Nvari's patterns flickered in confusion. Yes. Apparently, they build massive structures designed to simulate near-death experiences for pleasure. They call it fun. Zixtal's membrane pulsed with anxiety. And that's not even the most concerning part. Their medical technology, they've managed to reverse death itself in certain conditions. They call it clinical resurrection and treat it as a routine procedure. Below them, a group of human diplomats was touring the station's botanical gardens. Even from this distance, Zixtal could see the other species giving them a wide berth. Not out of fear, precisely, but a sort of instinctive respect one might afford a natural disaster. The Trade Federation is in an uproar, Nvari continued. The humans have offered to share their replication technology freely. No trade agreements, no political alliances required. They say it's basic humanitarian aid. Zixtal's secondary heart skipped a beat. Do they not understand how economies work? Oh, they understand perfectly. They simply don't care. Their representative, what was her name? Ambassador Patel. She said something rather remarkable during yesterday's session. She said, any society that requires artificial scarcity to function deserves to be disrupted. A commotion near the docking bay drew their attention. A human child had somehow gotten into the secure area and was now teaching a group of Vextherian warriors how to play something called hopscotch. The warriors, each of them decorated veterans of countless battles, were jumping on one leg and laughing. They're going to change everything, aren't they? Zixtal asked quietly. My friend, Nvari's patterns shifted to a deep, resonant blue. I believe they already have. The question isn't whether the galaxy will change, but whether we're prepared for what it will become. The humans have a saying, the genie is out of the bottle. I looked up what a genie is. Rather appropriate, don't you think? As if to punctuate her point, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The human ship had apparently decided to test its new, experimental, drive system. According to the readings, it was simultaneously in 12 different locations around the station. The humans called it a minor calibration issue. Zixtal watched as the station's best engineers rushed to study the phenomenon, their professional dignity forgotten in their excitement. That was the real problem with humans, he realized. They didn't just break rules, they made you want to break them too, just to see what would happen. The council meets in 2 hours to discuss their membership application, Nvari said. Will you support it? Zixtal thought about the security breaches, the economic disruption, the casual dismissal of physics as merely suggestions, and the chaos that seemed to follow humans everywhere they went. He thought about the child teaching ancient warriors to play, about diseases being cured, about hunger becoming obsolete, about death itself becoming negotiable. Yes, he said finally. May the first ones help us all, but yes. Because if we don't welcome them as equals, they'll change everything anyway. At least this way, we get to be part of the conversation. In the garden below, the hopscotch game had evolved to include anti-gravity fields. Zixtal decided he needed a drink. Preferably something stronger than the standard diplomatic refreshments. Perhaps he'd try that human beverage called coffee they kept raving about. After all, if the galaxy was going to change, he might as well change with it. The Trade Summit Incident. The Grand Hall of Commerce on Nexus Station had never been so crowded. Representatives from every major galactic power had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine trade summit. Instead, they were witnessing what many would later describe as the end of economics as they knew it. Ambassador Patel stood at the center of the presentation area, her holographic display showing what the humans called a matter resequencer. Behind her, her colleague Dr. Harrison was casually turning raw asteroid ore into everything from medical supplies to gourmet meals. As you can see, Patel continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing panic among the Trade Federation representatives, the technology is quite simple. We're simply rearranging matter at the quantum level. Any civilization with a basic understanding of quantum mechanics should be able to replicate this technology within a few years. In the audience, Trade Minister K.L. Vax of the mercantile worlds was turning an interesting shade of green. His species' natural coloring was blue. But this would destroy the entire basis of our economy, he sputtered. Trillions in trade agreements, centuries of carefully negotiated resource rights, all of it would become worthless overnight. Patel smiled diplomatically. Perhaps it's time for a new economy then. One based on creativity and innovation rather than artificial scarcity. From his observation post, Security Chief Raxtor watched the proceedings with growing concern. The humans had somehow managed to bring their demonstration equipment through security despite explicit prohibitions. When questioned, they had simply shown that their devices weren't on any banned list, because they hadn't existed until they were assembled on the spot. Fascinating approach to matter manipulation, commented senior scientist Venare, who had appeared silently beside him. Her crystalline form sparkled with intellectual excitement. Did you notice they're not just rearranging atoms? They're actually altering quantum probability states to ensure the most stable configuration manifests naturally. I noticed they're making our most sophisticated security measures look like primitive locks, Raxtor grumbled. How are we supposed to maintain order when they can literally create anything from anything else? Perhaps order itself needs to evolve, Venare suggested. Look there. Down in the presentation area, Dr. Harrison was now demonstrating what he called recreational applications. He had created a small zero-gravity field and was showing a group of young diplomats how to swim through the air. Their laughter echoed through the chamber, a stark contrast to the serious economic discussions happening nearby. They're not just changing our technology, Venare observed. They're changing how we think about possibility itself. The demonstration took an unexpected turn when a group of hegemony hardliners demanded proof that the technology couldn't be used for weapons. Dr. Harrison's response was characteristically human. Of course it can be used for weapons, he said cheerfully. Anything can be used for weapons. Watch this. He proceeded to turn a formal diplomatic document into a paper airplane, launching it across the room with surprising accuracy. See? Weapon. But why would you want to make weapons when you could make ice cream instead? He promptly demonstrated this alternative by converting his podium into what he called a soft-serve machine, complete with rainbow sprinkles. The hegemony representatives were left speechless, a condition that hadn't been observed in their species for several centuries. As the summit continued, more humans arrived, each bringing their own, cool things to share. One young engineer was teaching a group of quantum collective administrators how to create pocket dimensions for storage. Great for cleaning up your room, she explained, while casually violating several fundamental laws of physics. Another human was showing the Environmental Coalition how to terraform planets using what he called creative probability manipulation. When asked about the complex calculations involved, he shrugged and said they mostly let their AI handle that part. The fact that they treated superintelligent AI as casual assistants caused several coalition members to need medical attention. You have to admire their style, Venare said, watching as Ambassador Patel now demonstrated how to turn atmospheric pollution into edible protein. They're not just giving us technology, they're giving us permission to imagine a different future. Rackstor's security sensors suddenly went haywire as multiple unauthorized dimensional anomalies appeared throughout the station. Apparently, some of the younger diplomats had started experimenting with their newly acquired knowledge. Permission to imagine chaos, you mean, he muttered, dispatching teams to investigate the anomalies. Do you know what they call this disruption to the fundamental fabric of galactic society? Progress? Venare suggested. Worse. They call it Thursday. Rackstor checked his sensors again and groaned. Someone had turned the main security office into a giant aquarium, complete with earth fish. His staff was too busy playing with the dolphins to even report the breach. As the day drew to a close, the trade summit had transformed into something between a technology festival and a cosmic show and tell. The carefully planned economic discussions were forgotten as species that had been trading in scarcity for millennia began to imagine a universe of abundance. Ambassador Patel concluded her presentation with what she called a small gift, the complete schematics for their matter resequencing technology, freely available to all attendees. After all, she said with that characteristic human smile, information wants to be free. In the chaos that followed, nobody noticed Dr. Harrison quietly turning all the summit's leftover waste into musical instruments. By the time order was restored, an impromptu interspecies orchestra had formed in the station's main promenade. They were playing Yellow Submarine. Badly, but with unprecedented enthusiasm. Warriors of the Void. Fleet Commander Thrix watched in stunned silence as the pirate fleet approaching the Centauri trading route simply disappeared. No explosions, no debris field, not even a distress signal. One moment, 50 of the most feared raider vessels in the galaxy were bearing down on a vulnerable convoy. The next moment, they were gone. Status report, he managed to croak out. His sensor officer, still staring at the display in disbelief, took a moment to respond. Sir, the human vessel, barely an inconvenience, reports successful intervention. They say they've relocated the pirates to an uninhabited system about 3,000 light-years from here. They what? Apparently, they used something called a mass probability displacement field to. I'm reading this directly from their transmission. Help the pirates find a nice quiet place to think about their life choices. The human ship in question was barely visible on their sensors, a small corvette-class vessel that had been casually patrolling the trade route as part of the new Joint Defense Initiative. Its design violated at least 37 different principles of traditional space warfare, including having what appeared to be a small garden dome on its hull because the crew likes fresh tomatoes. Open a channel to their commander, Thrix ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the human captain lounging in what appeared to be a comfortable chair, drinking something from a mug that said, "World's okayest space captain." "Captain Richardson here," she said cheerfully. Don't worry about the pirates, we made sure to drop them near enough to a habitable planet. Even left them some survival supplies and a copy of Farming for Dummies. Figured they might want to try an honest living for a change. Thrix's secondary brain began to throb. Captain, the standard protocol for dealing with hostile forces. Oh, we know all about the protocols, Richardson interrupted, taking another sip from her mug. But we figured, why waste all that perfectly good matter and energy on explosions when we could just redistribute the problem? Plus, this way, nobody dies, and who knows? Maybe some of them will actually read the farming book. Before Thrix could formulate a response, his tactical officer reported another incoming threat. A hegemony battle fleet had decided to take advantage of the situation, jumping in with clear hostile intent. Ah, right on schedule, Richardson sighed. Would you like to handle this one, Commander, or should we? Pride made Thrix straighten his spine. The combined defense fleet stands ready to. He never finished the sentence. The human ship had already moved, although moved wasn't quite the right word. It seemed to blur, multiple versions of itself existing simultaneously, each one executing a different tactical approach. The hegemony fleet found itself facing what appeared to be both one ship and an armada, existing in a quantum superposition that made targeting impossible. Sorry to interrupt, Richardson's voice came through again, but we've got fresh cookies coming out of the oven in 5 minutes, and I'd hate for them to get cold. Let's wrap this up quickly. What followed defied every military doctrine Thrix had ever studied. The human ship didn't so much engage the hegemony fleet as it played with it. Weapon systems were transformed into abstract art installations. Engine cores were reprogrammed to play something called disco music. The flagship's bridge was temporarily relocated to a pleasant beach somewhere, complete with cocktails with little umbrellas in them. In less than 10 minutes, the mighty hegemony battle fleet had been reduced to a collection of very confused ships whose crews were too busy trying to figure out why their command chairs had turned into massage recliners to continue their attack. There we go, Richardson said brightly. We've also taken the liberty of installing some entertainment packages in their recreational facilities. Nothing brings people together like a good game of basketball. Oh, and we fixed that weird rattle in their primary drive cores, it was really bothering our engineer. Thrix watched as the hegemony ships began to retreat, some of them moving in a distinctly wobbly manner as their crews apparently discovered something called karaoke. Captain, he said carefully, your methods are unorthodox. Oh, that's nothing, Richardson replied. You should see what we do when we're actually trying to be creative. By the way, we're having a ship-wide barbecue next shift. Your crew is welcome to join us. Our hydroponics specialist just perfected growing Earth-style corn, and Lieutenant Wong makes a mean coleslaw. As Thrix struggled to reconcile this invitation with standard military protocols, his sensor officer reported yet another anomaly. The garden dome on the human ship had apparently expanded, and they were now broadcasting an open invitation to what they called a space tailgate party. Don't forget to bring a side dish. Richardson added cheerfully. Oh, and if anyone's interested, our AI is offering free quantum mechanics tutorials. She's a bit of a show-off, but she makes these really helpful holographic models. Just don't let her get started on cat paradoxes, she'll talk your ear off. In the distance, the relocated pirate fleet was reportedly forming an agricultural cooperative. The hegemony ships were organizing an interfleet talent show. And Thrix, veteran of countless space battles, found himself wondering if he should bring his grandmother's secret recipe for fermented root snacks to a barbecue. The galaxy, he realized, was never going to be the same. And somehow, that didn't seem like such a bad thing anymore. The Knowledge Exchange. The Grand Archives of Celestial Knowledge had stood as the galaxy's premier academic institution for over 12 millennia. Its crystalline spires housed the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 species, carefully curated and protected by the most brilliant minds in known space. Today, those same spires were witnessing what many scholars were calling an intellectual revolution, or, as some insisted, an intellectual riot. Professor Ninelith, Dean of Theoretical Sciences, watched in mounting horror as a human graduate student named Jasmine Kumar casually demolished 3,000 years of accepted quantum theory with what she called a back-of-the-napkin calculation. But that's impossible, stuttered Professor Ninelith, all 7 of his eye stalks focused on the crude diagram drawn on what appeared to be a takeout food container. The axioms of unified reality have been proven conclusively by the greatest minds of. Oh, those? Jasmine interrupted, pulling up another napkin from her seemingly bottomless bag. Yeah, we disproved those last week during a coffee break. Here, look, she flipped the napkin over, revealing more hastily scrawled equations. See, if you account for quantum tunneling in 11-dimensional space while drinking espresso, it all becomes pretty obvious. Across the grand hall, similar scenes were playing out. A human theoretical physicist was explaining to the quantum consciousness department how consciousness itself was just spicy math, while simultaneously teaching a group of young scholars something called interpretive dance physics. The problem with traditional quantum mechanics, the physicist explained, pirouetting gracefully, is that everyone takes it way too seriously. Watch, he executed a complex series of movements that somehow perfectly illustrated quantum entanglement. See? Physics is just the universe's way of dancing. In the applied sciences wing, things were even more chaotic. A human engineering team had decided to upgrade the archive's ancient computer systems. They hadn't asked permission, they had simply started working, claiming that the computers had looked sad. You can't just. Professor Ninelith struggled to find the words as he watched the humans work. Improve things without filling out the proper forms? Jasmine suggested cheerfully. Actually, we can. We wrote an AI to handle all the paperwork retroactively. It's really efficient, it even files forms for things we haven't thought of yet. The archive's AI Oversight Committee was having its own crisis. The human AI specialists had introduced their artificial intelligences to the archive's security systems, and now all the AIs were having what they called a digital coffee chat. Somehow, this had resulted in the entire archive's collection being reorganized according to what the AIs called vibes. Don't worry, assured Dr. Rodriguez, the human AI specialist, they're just making things more intuitive. Although you might want to avoid the temporal physics section for a few hours, the AIs are having a spirited debate about the nature of time, and some of the books keep changing their publication dates. In the biology department, a human xenobiologist had accidentally created a new form of life while trying to make better coffee. Instead of being concerned, she had immediately started teaching it tricks and named it Bob. It's actually quite friendly, she explained to the horrified xenobiology board. And it makes excellent espresso. Though you might want to avoid feeding it any mathematical theorems, it gets a bit hyperactive and starts solving unsolvable equations. The archive's traditional organization was crumbling by the hour. The carefully maintained boundaries between disciplines were dissolving as humans introduced concepts like interdisciplinary studies and thinking outside the box, a phrase that had caused particular confusion among the species that reproduced by mitosis. But how will we maintain order? Professor Ninelith asked desperately. How will we preserve the purity of academic disciplines? Purity. Jasmine looked genuinely puzzled. Professor, knowledge doesn't want to be pure, it wants to be free. Watch this, she pulled out her tablet and started sharing what she called open-source research papers across the galaxy's educational networks. We're making all human scientific knowledge freely available. No paywalls, no academic hierarchies, just pure intellectual chaos. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the archives, scholars from different disciplines began talking to each other, sharing ideas, and, most shockingly, collaborating without filling out any forms at all. The temporal mathematics department had merged with the music theory department, resulting in what they called time signature jazz. The philosophy department was now hosting weekly, existential coffee hours, where deep questions about the nature of reality were debated over something called pumpkin spice lattes. Even Bob, the coffee-created life form, had started its own study group, teaching younger scholars about the intersection of quantum mechanics and proper brewing temperatures. "This is madness," Professor Ninelith whispered, watching as centuries of academic tradition dissolved into what the humans called intellectual party time. "No," Jasmine corrected gently, "this is progress." "Here," she handed him a steaming cup of what smelled suspiciously like enlightenment. "Try some coffee. And maybe join us for the quantum physics karaoke later. We're proving string theory through interpretive rap." As the professor stared into his cup, he saw his reflection in the dark liquid, all 7 eye stalks wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. The humans hadn't just brought new knowledge to the archives, they'd brought a new way of thinking about knowledge itself. And somewhere in the temporal physics section, time itself was learning to dance. The final verdict. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so crowded. Representatives from every known species had gathered for what many were calling the most important decision in galactic history. The question before them was deceptively simple: what should be done about humanity? High Counselor Nvari stood at the central podium, her bioluminescent patterns shifting with the gravity of the moment. Before her lay reports from every major institution in the galaxy. The Trade Federation's economic models were in shambles. The military command was undergoing what they called aggressive restructuring. The Grand Archives had declared an intellectual renaissance. And these were just the official reports. "Order," she called, her patterns flashing authoritatively. "We are here to decide." She was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a human child science project in the middle of the chamber. It appeared to be a working model of the galaxy, complete with tiny ships engaged in what looked suspiciously like a dance competition. "Sorry about that," came a call from the human observation gallery. Tommy's quantum science fair project got a bit excited. "Don't worry, it'll collapse back into normal spacetime once it finishes the tango." Nvari waited for the model galaxy to finish its dance before continuing. "As I was saying, we are here to decide humanity's status in the galactic community. First, let us review the impacts of their presence." Ambassador Zixtal, now sporting what he called a coffee addiction, stepped forward. "The diplomatic corps has been completely transformed. Half our staff now solves international crises through something called game night. The other half is too busy learning human card games to start any new crises. Our efficiency is up 300%, though we're still not sure how to classify solving border disputes via Mario Kart tournaments in our official reports." The trade minister rose next, looking significantly calmer than during the earlier summit. "Our entire economic system has been revolutionized. Instead of fighting over resources, we're now dealing with an abundance of everything. Our biggest challenge is teaching people how to handle unlimited access to chocolate." From military command, Fleet Commander Thrix reported while wearing what appeared to be a kiss the cook apron. "The combined fleet now holds regular conflict resolution barbecues. Former pirates are teaching sustainable farming. The Hegemony Battle Fleet has started an interstellar choir. And somehow, we're experiencing the longest period of peace in recorded history." Professor Ninelith, now sporting several empty coffee cups and slightly manic eye stalks, spoke for the academic community. "Knowledge itself is evolving. We've made more breakthroughs in the last month than in the previous century. Though we're still trying to convince Bob the coffee-based life form to stop solving impossible mathematical problems during poetry slams." As the reports continued, a pattern emerged. Every single institution, tradition, and fundamental assumption about how the galaxy should work had been thoroughly disrupted. And yet, somehow, everything was working better than ever. "I believe," Nvari said carefully, "we need to hear from the humans themselves before making our decision." Ambassador Patel stepped forward, still holding what appeared to be a half-eaten sandwich. "Oh, we don't really mind what you decide. We're going to keep doing our thing either way. We just thought it would be more fun if we did it together. A murmur ran through the chamber. This wasn't how galactic politics was supposed to work. You couldn't just not care about official status. But what about rules? Protocol? The proper order of things, someone called out. We find that reality works better when you treat it more like guidelines than actual rules, Patel replied cheerfully. Besides, we brought cookies. As if on cue, platters of baked goods materialized throughout the chamber. Nvari noted with mild alarm that they appeared to be quantum entangled, somehow remaining both fresh-baked warm and optimally crispy simultaneously. The thing is, Patel continued, we've learned that the universe is far too wonderful to be contained by rules. It's meant to be explored, enjoyed, and occasionally gently persuaded to bend a bit. Like this, she casually reached out and folded spacetime into what appeared to be an origami crane. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some representatives were demanding immediate sanctions. Others were asking for baking recipes. A group in the back had somehow started an impromptu dance party with several quantum physicists. Nvari raised all four hands for silence. Perhaps, she said, her patterns showing what might have been amusement, we are asking the wrong question. Instead of deciding what to do about humanity, we should be asking, what will we become with humanity? She looked around the chamber, at the mixed groups of species now sharing cookies and discussing everything from faster-than-light travel to proper coffee brewing techniques. At the former enemies planning gaming tournaments. At the scholars excitedly sharing impossible ideas. I propose, she continued, that we recognize humanity not as subjects of our governance, but as catalysts of our evolution. They have shown us that the universe is far more magnificent, far more flexible, and far more fun than we ever imagined. The vote that followed was unlike any in council history. Instead of formal procedures, they used what humans called crowd enthusiasm. The motion passed with unprecedented support, though several representatives were too busy learning human dance moves to actually cast their votes. As the chamber celebrated, Ambassador Patel approached Nvari with a steaming mug. Coffee, she offered. And maybe after this, you'd like to see what happens when we teach quantum mechanics to jazz musicians? Nvari accepted the mug, her patterns shifting to display what she hoped was the correct expression for "bring it on." After all, if the galaxy was going to face an unforgivable disrespect of its most cherished traditions, it might as well do so caffeinated and with style.